What's up guys, it's Drifts and Lifts here. Alright, so today's episode we have a little bit of fun stuff for you guys. So as you can see, we are back at Post Haste Performance in Chilliwack, BC here. We got the panel wagon back on the dyno. And if you saw the last two episodes, we were basically doing the same stuff. We had this car on the dyno. But if you watch the last episode, you'll notice what peak power numbers I ended up getting out of that setup with the crazy NA cam, the TMOS 1310. So while the numbers were pretty good as far as like peak power numbers, I took it for one test drive down the road and did like one test pull, and I instantly knew that I wanted to change the setup. This setup that we had before, it was very peaky. It made all of its power in the top end and it had no torque down low. So I thought that would be kind of cool, but it was just so gutless down low that I instantly thought I should probably change this to a different camshaft. So we have pretty much the same setup on the dyno here, guys, but the only difference is the camshaft that we changed. So everything is the same, you know, it still has the 531 head ported and shaved by Dennis Blom from Sweden. Still got the Total Turbo Services HE341 turbo on it. Same standalone, EMU black. So the last camshaft setup was just way too gnarly. It had too much overlap and we were actually bleeding a lot of boost out, and it wasn't really well suited to this whole setup. So all we did, guys, is I had a Volvo K-Cam laying in my garage that I've ran in lots of different cars. So we swapped back to the K-Cam and I had to do a bunch of shimming because actually, shout out to Scandia Motors from Maple Ridge, BC, Canada. Those guys actually lent me their full shim kit. So they gave me a big favor by doing that, so we didn't have to like buy a bunch of shims. They just lent me the shim kit and I was able to fully shim this cam all good. The last camshaft had it actually had valve lash buckets on top of the valves that the stock bucket would sit on top to make up for that extra lash that we had to make up for. But this one I was able to run just the stock buckets and shim it that way. So what we got going on, guys, we're gonna get this retuned on pump gas as well as ethanol. So last time we had an E55 ethanol mixture. This cam and head setup is kind of cool because it's actually something I've never ran before. It's gonna be a unique setup that we're kind of stoked to see what happens. But it's gonna bring a lot of the low end torque back, I'm pretty sure. And being that this head setup is still really high compression, it's 10.8 to 1 compression ratio. It's gonna make pretty good torque down low. It should be really responsive in the low end, and also in the top end it should pull pretty good just because of the head being ported and that kind of thing. So the K-Cam is actually a fairly aggressive cam by stock cam standards. The specs are 12 millimeters of lift. It's got 257 degrees of duration on the exhaust valve and 270 degrees of duration on the intake valve. So actually a pretty aggressive cam from like as far as factory specs go. The factory cams in these were like 225 degree duration, like intake and exhaust, so really mild. This should help, you know, kind of make a pretty good well-rounded motor. So we just got on the dyno, just got everything hooked up, so Dan's gonna start working his magic in a sec here. Before I continue on the video though, guys, I want to let you know, big shout out to everybody that bought merchandise. I really appreciate it. It helps out the channel tremendously. I wouldn't be able to, like, you know, do all these separate tunes and buy all these different parts if it weren't for you guys supporting me, buying merchandise and that kind of thing. So one more thing I want to mention, guys, if you don't know already, I have a Patreon. So you know, if you guys want to donate a small little bit of money per month to my Patreon, everything that you guys donate goes back into the cars to try to make better content out of it. So we're gonna let Dan work his magic, and then we'll see what it makes on pump gas, and then we're gonna dump some ethanol in it, and I think we're gonna make some pretty good power numbers this time. I just went and ate some chicken wings at my house, and I came back and they just dumped some ethanol in it. So they're done with you know, optimizing the pump gas tune. So we put it on an E60 mixture because that's what comes out of the pumps in British Columbia, Canada here. All right guys, so my apologies. I only got to film one hit on the dyno. So just as we got into tuning on ethanol, so we did the E60 mixture, we actually ran into slipping clutch issues. So really excited. I'm gonna show you guys the numbers on the dyno graph right there in a little bit. But unfortunately our spec stage 1 clutch actually started slipping at a pretty high torque number. So all I gotta say before we check out the dyno graphs is this camshaft in this setup is much better. So that Timos cam, the 1310 NA cam, was just way too big, and it was wasting a lot of the turbo boost essentially. It made it not really an efficient engine. This camshaft is just miles better. So let's check out the dyno graph. It made enough torque to start slipping this clutch. All right guys, so obviously the dyno graph only goes up to the RPM where the clutch starts to slip, and Dan kind of got out of it because he figured there's no point, you know, running the slipping clutch. So what we got here is our old setup that we just tuned. So if you guys saw like the last video, this is the dotted line of our old setup. So that's the horsepower number, and the blue dotted line down here is our torque number from before. So let me just grab this one sec here. So the thick lines with our red thick line and the blue right there is our new numbers. So let me grab this little scroll thing down here and let's go through the graph and kind of see how much better this setup really is. All right guys, so down at 2,500 RPM, which is basically where the graph starts, this K-cam is already making way more torque, basically double the torque down there. So if you look down there, 77 foot-pounds is what the old cam setup was making at that RPM, and this cam setup's making 147. So literally double down there, and that trend is pretty much the same as we go up into the RPM. So as you can see, torque is coming in way earlier. Our old torque right around 4,000 RPM was only 173 foot-pounds, and we have already 330 foot-pounds at 4,000 RPM. So yeah, it's just so much better, guys. This is gonna pull so much harder. I'm glad that I decided to swap this cam in. Once I do the BMW ZF transmission and we get a clutch that can hold this power, it's gonna be pretty wild. So as we go up, Dan, honestly, he just started getting into tuning it, so there's still some optimization to be done. He can probably throw more timing and more boost at it. But as you can see here, so interesting, at around 5,000 RPM, actually let's go to the peak boost. So peak boost on our old setup was 32 pounds, right at around 5,000 RPM. So our new setup only has 27 pounds of boost, and the torque difference is 313 foot-pounds of torque at that peak boost, compared to like 381 foot-pounds up here. So I think the torque ended up being like 390 basically, and our horsepower number was upper 390, so it's getting into the 390s. And if we were allowed, you know, if Dan stayed into it and he pulled it all the way to 7, I think this graph, once we get a solid clutch that's gonna hold this power, this graph is just gonna go all the way. And we're probably gonna let it limit at about 7, maybe a little farther, because we do have the upgraded valve springs in this head. So we'll kind of see, we'll see where the graph starts to nose over, and then we'll kind of limit it around there. But with this setup, the dope thing is we don't have to rev it so hard. Like the old setup, it had to rev so hard to make the power all the way to pretty much 8,000 RPM. And this setup is going to make the power so much earlier, but it's also going to carry the power out, you know, to a pretty high RPM. So there's just way more on the graph. It's just a way better setup. So unfortunately, guys, I'm not going to be able to drive this in the near future. So it's probably going to be about a week or two before I can actually drive this on the road. We're going to try to throw the BMW ZF transmission in this car tomorrow, and hopefully before Dan goes on, you know, winter break, Christmas break, hopefully he can finish the tune with a clutch that's actually going to be able to hold this. So hopefully with this 6-puck clutch disc and this pressure plate setup that I have, it's gonna be able to hold the power that we're gonna make. If it starts to slip, we can dial it back just so I can drive the car and enjoy it for winter and film some cool videos for you guys. But yeah, so I'm super stoked, guys. This is like really awesome. I think if we can run this out, a little bit more timing, a little bit more boost, we're gonna make over 400 foot-pounds of torque and probably, you know, over 400 wheel horsepower.
Yo, what's up, guys? I'll call from Stop it. Hi.
Hey Dan, Volvo B230 best engine you've ever tuned, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You need to pay me now.
All right, guys. So we are at Post Haste Performance for day 2 of some shenanigans with the panel wagon. So yesterday we had it on the dyno, as you guys saw there, and we made some really good power numbers, and the clutch started slipping. So with our new K-cam setup in the 531 head, this setup is really potent. And it makes buttloads of torque, and the clutch started slipping past about 390 foot-pounds. So it probably would have actually read a little bit more on that pull. And even on that dyno run, it still had a lot more in it. Dan said there's a little bit of timing to add, and we can probably go up in the boost as well. So this thing is gonna make some serious power. And obviously our M47 transmission with our whatever clutch we have in there right now is not up to spec. So what we got here, guys, is I'm gonna be installing our BMW ZF transmission in the panel wagon today. So I'll do a little bit, like I'll show you guys kind of how I do it. I'm actually not too sure how it's gonna go quite yet. There's gonna be a few things that we have to deal with as far as the clutch slave cylinder and shimming that and getting everything lined up so the clutch operates properly, because this is a full swap. And we're gonna be using the Volvo flywheel with the Volvo pressure plate, but then we're gonna be using a BMW clutch disc. So it's gonna be a little bit Mickey Mouse. Dennis Blom, my good friend from Sweden, who actually hooked me up with this, said I should be able to make it work. We have our, we can shim the clutch fork and we can extend the rod on the slave cylinder if we need. So I guess I'll get into it, guys. First step of removing a transmission, if you haven't done this before on one of your Volvos, you're gonna get all the bell housing bolts, and I actually get the top bell housing bolts from the engine bay, so you can get the top 3 ones on the starter, top of the bell housing, and a couple down on the passenger side from the top here, and then we'll go underneath and get the other 4. All right, guys, so as you can see, I got those 2 bell housing bolts out. We're gonna get the bottom 14 millimeters and then 1 more on the starter, and then that's all for that. Then the next thing we're gonna do, there's a bunch of stuff you gotta do, but I'm just gonna, in no specific order, take out this slave cylinder. So there's a snap ring right here, and then the slave cylinder will just push out of the bell housing. Then what we're gonna do is disconnect our drive shaft. So there's a bunch of 19 millimeter bolts on the guibo there. We're actually gonna throw an angle gauge on the drive shaft just so we can have the exact same angle as last time. And then because the center support bearing is right here, the second half of the drive shaft is gonna be the same angle as it was before. So we're only worrying about the angle of this front drive shaft and whereabouts our transmission is gonna be mounted. All right, so we put an angle finder on, we zeroed it on the center support bearing mount there, and the drive shaft is pretty much exactly 0 parallel with this mount. So that's good, we know that now. So now we can just basically disassemble and remove our old M47. So if you guys see that little Allen key right there, so I'm gonna take that out. That's gonna come out, and then we're gonna remove this, this pin through here. Then once you have that, the shifter can flop around however you need it to, and then it'll be able to go forward enough that you can get the tranny out. Because if you don't do that, the shifter just runs into the body and you won't get it out, so. All right, guys, so as you can see, we got our M47 transmission out. So if we're actually looking at the pressure plate here, we definitely can see some hot spots on it. So that would be, from the clutch slipping on the dyno. Now, I'm not too sure, actually I just thought about this. I'm not too sure what size the BMW input shaft, the end of it is for the pilot bearing. Yes, that's right. So I'm not too sure if I'm gonna have to swap out the pilot bearing. It almost looks like it might be the same size. We might get lucky in that sense. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna test fit our 6-puck clutch with our pressure plate over here. I'll show you guys. So this is the clutch that came out. It's a spec stage 1 something or other. This is the factory disc. Actually not the factory, it's actually the one that came with the stage 1 pressure plate. And here's our 6-puck BMW disc. So same diameter, 228 millimeters, but this one has a different spline on it for the BMW transmission. So we're hoping that everything works out, and this pressure plate is gonna clamp down on this nicely. I guess the next thing we're gonna have to find a BMW clutch alignment tool. Yeah, but we're making our way, so we'll figure this out. All right, guys, so in typical drifts and lifts fashion, I got a little bit carried away. Forgot to film me installing the tranny, but let me get this light for you guys. So the new transmission actually bolts in really nicely, really fucking dope. So what we're doing here, guys, this is the tranny mounts for, these are actually Volvo factory tranny mounts. So there's 2 of them, and we're gonna be building like a custom tranny mount. We're gonna use the stock Volvo tranny mount, and we're gonna use some like pipe that goes like this with a washer on it, and then weld it to the tranny mount. And then we're gonna be able to put like an extension through this way to tighten this bolt, or the nut, sorry, as well as this nut on the top. So pretty cool. And also our M90 drive shaft seems to be pretty much the perfect length. So we got our Guivo there. We're just kind of mocking everything up because it's looking like we're probably gonna have to buy a new clutch disc. I don't think this one is gonna hold. It's pretty worn out. So we might be, you know, buying a few parts before we can get this fully going. But really sick just to see the BMW transmission in here. So I think what we're gonna do is, I'm not too sure, I haven't asked Mr. Dennis Blom about this, but I think we're gonna be removing this at the top here and installing the one from this tranny, because we're gonna be using our TRX shifter. So that's going to be going into the same spot that the stock Volvo shifter is. And then we're going to need like a rod that extends and bolts up to the bottom of that. So we're making our way, but this tranny is going to come out again before we actually get it all set up. We're just kind of mocking things up. Right now, I installed, or sorry, I didn't install, I poured ATF fluid in this thing because they use ATF. So apparently if you use anything else, they don't like to shift very well and you can wreck the synchros. So yeah, we're making way, guys. Now I'm gonna have to figure out a slave cylinder. So I have a BMW slave cylinder at my house. We're just not sure how it's gonna go for the shimming as far as the clutch, the slave cylinder rod goes. We're gonna have to either extend it or shorten it. We're not really sure what the best bet at this point is gonna be. Alrighty, guys, so we tried out a couple things today, and unfortunately we're not going to be able to get the transmission into the car today, set up, running, driving, ready to go. I need to get another transmission mount because, as you guys can see, this is the manual transmission mount for like old style M47, M46 cars, and I actually need an automatic transmission mount because it's way more flat, a lot easier to make our custom tranny mount out of. This one's just going to be way too much messing around with how it's kind of like a V shape there. So yeah, I got a new throwout bearing. So that's right here, that's all good. And one really cool thing I didn't even show you guys is, so this is the shifter extension piece for the M47 transmission. And it actually just bolts right up on the BMW transmission. So this is actually gonna bring our length of this transmission perfectly for our aftermarket shifter that's gonna sit in the factory location, just right up there. So really cool, like this tranny, just, it's so bolt in for this car. Once you get this bell housing welded, there's a lot of parts that kind of just work with this whole setup. So I'm pretty excited, guys. Yeah, like even like a, you know, factory Volvo drive shaft is the proper length to bolt up, and it also has the proper Guibo. So really dope. We're gonna leave you there for today, guys. Actually, one thing, I got to get another Guibo as well. So this thing's pretty gross, as you can see, all the cracking in it and stuff. So I'll try to find one in my garage that'll be a little bit better, and we'll go from there. So still stuff to come for the channel, guys. So I apologize that, you know, we haven't got any like cool panel wagon drifting videos lately, but we're making our way there. And next time you guys see a panel wagon drifting video, this thing is going to be ripping really good. I'm really stoked because this transmission has really short gear ratios. So 5th gear is actually 1-to-1, whereas 4th gear in the M47 is 1-to-1. So on this transmission, we essentially have like 1 extra gear in between on our way to the 1-to-1 ratio. So it's going to be like super torquey. We haven't, like I said at the beginning of the video, guys, you saw those dyno numbers there. We were just getting started on making the power out of it, so it's definitely got a little bit more in it. And just due to the fact that the clutch was slipping, the dyno wasn't exactly able to read the full torque that it was putting down. So we're definitely going to be looking over 400 wheel torque to the wheels, and wheel torque to the wheels. And probably about just pretty similar in horsepower. It looks like the setup's gonna do really similar torque and horsepower. So anyways, guys, yeah, before I get going there, make sure to check out the Drifts and Lifts store. These are limited supplies, so we only have like, I wanna say 40 left. So if you guys want one of these hoodies, get them today because they're gonna be gone really soon. We also have our Drifts and Lifts stickers on the site now, so check that out. And yeah. Also guys, I want to give a big shout out to Post Haste Performance. So this is the biggest sponsor of the channel, and they've been helping me for years with all my Volvo junk. So shout out to these guys. If you guys have any performance and tuning stuff you want done, always check out Post Haste Performance, located in Chilliwack, BC, Canada. And yeah, so anyways, like and subscribe for ashy Volvo knuckles. Peace out.